Albert William thought he was just making a joke. But when the cleaning lady answered, her 6 words hit harder than any market crash. 70 floors above downtown Chicago, the city looked like a circuit board. Pulsing lights, streaming traffic, and a hum of ambition that never slept. Inside the glass and steel fortress of Wilshire Plaza Tower, Albert Williams stood at the head of a long mahogany table, surveying his empire like a general reviewing a losing battle. The boardroom smelled of power, imported whiskey, polished oak, and the faint tang of expensive cologne. Behind him, the skyline glowed through floor-to-ceiling windows, the horizon streaked with gold and gray. It was the kind of view that made men feel untouchable. Albert swirled the amber liquid in his glass, eyes fixed on the projection screen. A bar chart bled red. The numbers weren't just bad, they were humiliating. The merger he'd bragged about for months, his supposed masterstroke, was devouring profits faster than the market could blink. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice a smooth blend of charm and threat, "you're showing me excuses, not solutions." A nervous cough broke the silence. His CFO, Richard Mays, adjusted his tie and stammered, "Market volatility, sir. It's temporary." Albert cut him off with a lazy smirk. "Temporary? I've been hearing that for 3 quarters. I didn't build a fortune waiting for markets to be kind." He leaned back, tapping the glass table with a gold pen. "Tell me something I don't know, or at least pretend you deserve your salaries." Laughter rippled uneasily around the table. It didn't reach his eyes. Near the corner of the room, Catherine Richard wrung out her mop in a gray bucket, her movements steady, unhurried. Her uniform was plain, her shoes worn from long shifts, but there was a quiet precision in the way she worked, like someone who measured her world by more than square footage. Albert noticed her reflection in the window, small, unobtrusive, invisible. He raised an eyebrow, his tone sharpening with mock amusement. "Maybe I should start taking advice from the cleaning staff," he said, swirling the ice in his glass. "What do you think, Miss Richard? Got any financial wisdom for us today?" A few of the men chuckled, grateful for the break in tension. One even muttered, "Ask her how to mop up a balance sheet." But Catherine didn't laugh. She paused, wrung out her mop again, and looked up, not at the floor, but straight at him. Her eyes were calm, the kind of calm that comes from having nothing left to prove. She said, evenly, "Stop investing in what you don't understand." The sound hit the room like a pin drop in a cathedral. The laughter cut off mid-breath. Even the digital hum of the projector seemed to fade. Albert froze, glass still in hand. For a moment, he couldn't tell if she was mocking him or teaching him. "What did you just say?" he asked quietly. Catherine returned to her work. "You heard me, sir." For the first time in his career, Albert William, the man who could talk down senators and CEOs, had no words. He watched her leave the room, her footsteps soft against the marble, and felt something unexpected coil in his chest. Not anger, not embarrassment, something heavier, a thought he couldn't shake. Who is she? That question would haunt him long after the meeting ended, long after the numbers, the whiskey, and the view lost their shine. What Albert didn't yet know was that Catherine Richard once lived in the same world he ruled, a world of spreadsheets, stock prices, and ruthless ambition. But that was before everything fell apart, before the crash, before silence became her only power. And it was that silence that had just changed everything. That night, Albert couldn't shake her words. "Stop investing in what you don't understand." They echoed between the clink of his glass and the city lights beyond his penthouse window. He had been insulted by senators, challenged by rivals, mocked by journalists, but none of it ever lingered like this. Her voice wasn't defiant, it was certain, and that certainty unnerved him. By midnight, the glow of his laptop bathed the room in cold light. He typed her name into the company database, Catherine Richard. Her file was barely a page long. Age, 48. Position, custodial staff. Education, high school diploma. Employment history, routine, spotless, unremarkable. He scrolled again, waiting for something else, a line that would explain her calm intelligence, her choice of words. Nothing, just payroll forms and years of loyal service. Albert leaned back in his chair, frustrated. "Who are you, Miss Richard?" he murmured. He closed the laptop, but not the thought. Somewhere in the back of his mind, the certainty of her tone gnawed at him like unfinished business. Across the city, Catherine unlocked the door to a small, aging apartment on the south side. The building smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. Inside, the space was neat, humble, everything in its place. A pot simmered quietly on the stove as she slipped off her shoes and hummed under her breath. After dinner, she cleared the table and opened a worn leather notebook. Its pages were filled with handwritten numbers, charts, and equations. The kind of detailed calculations that belonged on a trader's desk, not a kitchen table. She adjusted her glasses and began to write, her pencil moving with an ease that came from years of discipline. On the wall above her desk hung a framed photograph. A younger Catherine beside a man in a suit, both smiling in front of a downtown bank logo. Her husband. That was before 2008, before the crash took their jobs, their home, and not long after his life. Catherine paused, her gaze lingering on the picture. She had once spoken in boardrooms, once analyzed balance sheets for men like Albert William, men who thought risk was a game. When the crash came, those men got bailouts. She got silence. Still, she couldn't unlearn what she knew. Numbers were a language that had never betrayed her. They spoke truth even when people didn't. As the clock crept toward midnight, Catherine closed her notebook and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in one of those glittering towers, a man was probably staring into his whiskey, wondering how a cleaning lady had seen through him so easily. She smiled faintly. Because I used to be him, she thought. And with that, she turned off the light. By Monday morning, the Wilshire Plaza Tower had lost its shine. The marble floors still gleamed, but the numbers behind them didn't. Inside the boardroom, tension buzzed beneath the hum of the projector. A quiet, relentless pressure that even Albert's sharp suits and sharper confidence couldn't disguise. Charts glowed, red across the wall. Revenue was falling, projections collapsing, and the once promising merger had become a drain no one could explain. Every report told a different story, but none of them made sense. Albert sat at the head of the table, jaw tight. "We've been bleeding for 6 months," he said flatly. "I want answers, not optimism." CFO Richard Mays leaned forward, his smile polished and professional. "We're just seeing temporary adjustments. The merger's integration costs are higher than forecasted, but nothing unexpected. The fundamentals remain strong." Albert's eyes narrowed. "Strong?" "Mays, the fundamentals are on life support." Mays spread his hands, cool as ever. "The market's volatile. Once our new investments mature, we'll stabilize." Across the table, a few board members nodded weakly, unwilling to challenge him. The room smelled faintly of tension, cologne, sweat, and stale confidence. Then Albert's gaze drifted toward the glass doors. Catherine Richard was mopping just outside, silent and methodical as always. For a reason he couldn't name, her voice replayed in his head. "Stop investing in what you don't understand." On impulse, he pressed the intercom. "Miss Richard," he called. "You can come in and finish up while we're here." A few executives exchanged amused glances. May smirked, but said nothing. Catherine stepped in quietly, rolling her cart to the corner of the room. She didn't look at anyone. She simply began cleaning, her soft footsteps the only sound between bursts of corporate jargon. Mays was mid-sentence, gesturing toward a spreadsheet. "Minor losses in the third quarter, all within projections. The figures from ArcLight subsidiaries are already being reconciled." Catherine's hand paused mid-swipe. Her eyes flicked to the screen just for a second. The logo, ArcLight subsidiaries, caught her attention. She'd seen that name before, years ago, on reports from another merger that ended in disaster. She tilted her head slightly. The numbers were off, not by much, just a few decimals, but enough to raise a red flag to anyone who understood patterns. When the meeting ended, Albert stayed behind, his frustration barely concealed. As the others filed out, Catherine quietly approached the table, her mop balanced in her hand. "Mr. William," she said softly, "you should compare the ArcLight ledgers to last quarter's reports." He looked up, startled. "Excuse me. The rounding's wrong," she said. Different reporting formats, same totals. Someone's hiding movement between accounts. Albert stared at her, the air between them charged. How do you even know that? Catherine met his gaze, calm as ever. Because I've seen it before. Then she turned and left, leaving behind the faint scent of detergent, and a question Albert couldn't ignore. For the first time, he wondered if the woman polishing his floors was seeing things none of his experts could. Albert couldn't let it go. All day, Catherine's quiet voice echoed through his thoughts. Compare the ledgers, the rounding's wrong. And she'd been right. His auditors confirmed it. Numbers had been subtly adjusted across multiple reports. Small errors, almost invisible, but deliberate. Someone inside was manipulating data. That night, long after the building emptied, Albert sat alone in his office, the city stretching beneath him in a maze of cold lights. He pulled up her file again, Catherine Richard. The page still read like a blank slate. But this time, he wasn't satisfied with blanks. He picked up the phone and called in a favor, an old friend who owed him more than one. Run a background check, he said quietly. The name's Catherine Richard. Start with Atlanta. I want everything. Hours later, an email arrived. Albert clicked it open. What he found stopped him cold. Before she was a cleaning lady, Catherine Richard had been a senior financial analyst at First Federal Bank of Atlanta. Her record was impeccable, precise, innovative, admired. But in 2008, the bank collapsed under the weight of risky mortgage-backed securities. Thousands lost their jobs overnight. Her name appeared in an old article about layoffs and foreclosures. Her husband, James Richard, had died that same year, a heart attack at 49. The note in the obituary mentioned financial strain. The house they'd owned was repossessed 2 months later. Albert stared at the screen, the glow reflecting off the whiskey in his glass. For the first time, shame pressed against his pride. He thought of her gray uniform, her calm composure, her eyes when she'd said stop investing in what you don't understand. He understood now. She hadn't just been talking about money. The next morning, he asked his assistant to call her up. Tell Miss Richard I'd like a word. Privately. Catherine arrived after her shift, cautious and silent. Albert gestured to the chair across from him. I just wanted to understand your story, he said, his tone softer than usual. You used to work in finance. Why this? She hesitated, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Because life doesn't always care what you're qualified for, Mr. William. He leaned forward. You lost everything, didn't you? Her gaze didn't waver. Not everything. Just what couldn't last. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Money doesn't reveal character, Mr. William. It exposes it. The silence between them stretched. Heavy, honest. Albert felt something he hadn't in years. Humility. He'd spent his life surrounded by people who agreed with him, who chased his approval. But this woman, this quiet, unassuming woman, was showing him the truth about himself without even trying. As Catherine rose to leave, Albert realized he no longer saw a janitor. He saw a mirror, and the reflection staring back unsettled him more than any financial loss ever could. Catherine had learned to listen to silence. It always told the truth before anyone else dared to. As she moved through the executive floor late at night, mop in hand, she noticed things others missed. A crumpled financial report in a wastebasket, a draft ledger left in the copier tray, a half-printed statement jammed in the machine. To anyone else, it was trash. To her, it was a trail. At first, she told herself to ignore it. She was done with numbers, done with ambition and the ruin it brought. But the patterns nagged at her. Subtotals that didn't balance. Margins rewritten. Figures duplicated across different subsidiaries. It wasn't sloppiness. It was strategy. That night, after a shift, Catherine sat at her kitchen table in the small apartment on 83rd Street. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence as she flipped open her old, worn notebook, the same one she'd used in Atlanta years ago. On each page, she began to rewrite the numbers she'd found, connecting them line by line. Her pencil moved quickly, confidently. The math made sense until it didn't. One name appeared repeatedly. Mays. Each time she cross-checked his department's filings, the gaps widened. Offshore subsidiaries. Duplicated invoices. Money flowing into ghost accounts labeled under neutral-sounding firms. Crownbridge Holdings, Vista Limited, Orion Capital. By midnight, the truth sat before her, cold and undeniable. Someone was bleeding the company dry from the inside. Meanwhile, in his corner office, Albert was losing sleep. Catherine's words had carved something sharp into his thoughts, a quiet distrust of the people he'd built his empire with. He called Mays in the next morning. "Walk me through the merger numbers again," Albert said. Mays didn't even blink. "Smooth as always. Everything's on track, sir. Minor discrepancies, but that's just transfer lag between accounts. I can have finance clean it up this week." Albert studied him. The man didn't flinch, didn't fumble, practiced confidence. So he tested him. Funny thing, the cleaning lady said something didn't add up. That earned a smirk. "You're taking advice from a janitor now?" Mays chuckled. "Next, she'll be running the audit department." Albert forced a smile, but something in his gut turned. The more Mays talked, the less he trusted. Later that night, Catherine ran her hand over the pages of her notebook, the calculations precise and relentless. She didn't want to be right, but she was. Wilshire Plaza Tower was built on glass, and the cracks were spreading fast. Catherine stood at the door of Albert's office, her hands clutching the worn notebook that had once rebuilt her life and might now save his. Albert looked up, impatient. "You said it was urgent." "It is," she replied quietly, stepping forward. "Mr. William, I've gone through your subsidiary reports. The ledgers don't match. Your CFO, Mays, he's moving money through shell companies. If you don't act now, this entire tower will come down." Albert's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation, Miss Richard." "It's not an accusation," she said, placing the open notebook on his desk. "It's math." He glanced at the pages, handwritten figures, arrows, corrections. "Too simple, too human. You expect me to believe this?" "Mays is lying to you," she said softly. "You built your empire on trust, but he's using that trust to bury you." He leaned back, smirking to hide the unease tightening his chest. "You think you understand my business better than I do? You clean floors, Catherine. Stay in your lane." Her eyes didn't flinch. "You want the truth," she said, "but only when it comes from someone who looks like you." The words hit him like a slap, sharp, undeniable. But pride moved faster than reason. "Get out," he said coldly, "and take your stories with you. You're finished here." Catherine nodded once, no anger, no tears. She simply placed her mop against the wall, left her notebook on his desk, and walked out, her quiet dignity echoing louder than any defense. 3 weeks later, Wilshire Capital began to unravel. Stocks plummeted. The merger imploded. And Richard Mays, the man Albert defended, vanished overseas, along with $7 million. In the empty glass office, Albert stared at Catherine's forgotten notebook, the truth he refused to see. The city had never felt so quiet. Albert sat alone in his penthouse, the skyline that once symbolized triumph, now a jagged reminder of everything he'd lost. Newspapers covered the scandal. Wilshire Capital collapses amid fraud investigation. His name had become a punchline. His phone, once endless with calls, was silent. He poured a drink but stopped midway when he saw it. A small envelope resting at the corner of his desk. He hadn't noticed it before, tucked beneath a pile of forgotten papers. His name was written in neat, steady handwriting. He tore it open. Inside were several pages filled with calculations, cross-reference data, and a single handwritten note. "When you're ready to listen, truth is still truth. K.R." Albert sat there for a long time, staring at the words. The guilt hit hard, sharper than the fall of his company. He realized she hadn't wanted money, or power, or credit. She'd only wanted to be heard. The next evening, he found himself standing outside a dimly lit office complex on the south side. Through the window, he saw her, Catherine, mopping floors just as she always had, headphones in, lost in quiet rhythm. He stepped inside. "Catherine," he said softly. She turned, startled, then wary. "Mr. William." "I was wrong," he said. The words came out heavy, sincere. "I need your help, not as your boss, just as a man who finally sees what he broke." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded once. "We rebuild this," she said calmly, "but not for your pride. For what's right." And there, In that humble office under flickering fluorescent lights, a fallen millionaire and a forgotten analyst began the slow, honest work of putting truth back together. The boardroom was tense, the same gleaming chamber where laughter once mocked truth. Albert stood at the head of the long mahogany table, papers spread before him, voice steady but low. "We've been lied to," he began. "Funds were diverted, reports forged, and the man behind it," he paused, looking toward the empty chair at the end of the table, was Richard Mays. Gasps rippled through the room. The directors exchanged uneasy glances, denial written in their silence. "Do you have proof?" one finally demanded. Albert turned toward the back of the room. "Yes," he said, "and the person who found it is sitting right there." All eyes shifted to Catherine. She rose slowly, walking to the front. No podium, no notes, just quiet certainty. Her voice was calm, measured. On February 12th, Mays authorized a transfer from subsidiary account 3,387 to Crownbridge Holdings. The invoice number was duplicated from a previous quarter's expense. Line 47, column G. She continued, detail after detail, reciting the numbers from memory, each figure cutting deeper than accusation. The room grew still. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop. When she finished, Albert spoke again, his tone softened with something rare, reverence. "She saved this company," he said quietly, "when we thought she was just cleaning it." No one laughed this time. Within days, Mays was arrested. But what was restored that morning wasn't just a company. It was Albert's humanity and Catherine's long overdue truth finally taking its rightful place in the light. The Wilshire Plaza tower gleamed again, but this time its shine felt different, quieter, earned. Months had passed since the reckoning, and the company that once stood on arrogance now rested on truth. Albert William had changed. The tailored suits remained, but the man inside them had learned something money could never buy: humility. At the heart of the rebirth was a new initiative, the Richard Fund, a venture dedicated to supporting small entrepreneurs from struggling neighborhoods. Food truck owners, bookstore dreamers, single mothers with kitchen businesses, all now had a fighting chance. And at the helm of it all was Catherine Richard, not as an employee, but as a partner. The launch event filled the atrium of Wilshire Plaza. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and investors nodded in approval. When the first journalist asked, "Ms. Richard, what did you tell Mr. William that changed everything?" she smiled faintly, her voice calm and steady. "I didn't teach him money," she said. "I taught him value." Applause rose, soft but genuine. Later that evening, the city stretched golden beneath the setting sun as Albert and Catherine sat across from each other in his office, coffee cups steaming between them. "You know," Albert said quietly, watching the skyline, "I envy you. Not your wisdom, your peace." Catherine smiled, her eyes reflecting the dawn that was slowly breaking over Chicago. "That's because peace can't be bought," she said. "It's earned." They sat in silence, two people from different worlds bound by the same truth. Far below, the streets of Chicago pulsed with life. And for the first time, Albert looked down, not from power but from gratitude, finally seeing the woman who had lifted him up. The real wealth, he realized, was never his. It was hers all along. Thank you for staying to the end. Trust you enjoyed this one. Next one will be interesting than this. Hit the like button, comment your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe so that you will be alerted when we drop another one and help let the video to go viral. Thank you.